Take a deep breath, and let's hear a story about Georgia, a determined young woman who discovered her passion for surfing in the moonlight's embrace. The small coastal town of Bayside welcomed each morning with gentle waves caressing its shores, painting the sand with delicate patterns that disappeared with each new tide. Georgia Hamilton, a 16-year-old girl with sun-kissed freckles and eyes that mirrored the ocean's blue depths, lived in a weathered but charming white house perched on a small cliff overlooking the sea. The salty breeze would drift through her open window each morning, carrying the rhythmic sounds of waves that seemed to whisper her name, inviting her to join their eternal dance. Georgia's father, Robert, a widower with kind eyes and calloused hands, managed the local fishing supply store, returning home each evening with stories of the sea and sometimes treasures washed ashore. His deep, soothing voice filled their home with warmth as he recounted tales of legendary surfers who had once graced their shores, his words painting vivid pictures in Georgia's imagination. The subtle scent of his pine aftershave would linger in the hallway, mixing with the ever-present saltiness of the air, creating a fragrance that Georgia associated with security and love. The Hamilton household vibrated with the energy of Georgia's three older brothers, Max, Liam, and Charlie, renowned local surfers whose trophies adorned every shelf and whose names were spoken with reverence in town. Their laughter echoed through the house like thunder, their movements swift like the currents they conquered daily, their presence both overwhelming and comforting. Each morning before dawn, Georgia would watch from her window as they carried their boards to the beach, moving in perfect synchrony like a school of fish navigating the depths. The brothers' surfboards rested against the wall of the porch, polished, waxed, and treated with reverence, forbidden territory for Georgia, who was repeatedly told that surfing was too dangerous for their little sister. "You're still just a girl, Georgie," they would say, with affectionate pats on her head, their words well-intentioned but sharp as coral against her dreams. The gleaming surfaces of their boards caught the sunlight, reflecting prisms that danced across the wooden floor, tempting Georgia with their silent invitation. As weeks turned into months and months into years, Georgia found solace in watching, studying the rhythmic dance of surfers from her bedroom window, memorizing their movements, the way their bodies became one with the waves. In quiet moments by herself, she would close her eyes and feel the phantom sensation of riding a wave, her heart racing with the imagined thrill of gliding across the water's surface. The gentle swaying of curtains in the evening breeze sometimes mimicked the motion of surfing, and Georgia would lose herself in the sensation, her body instinctively leaning into imaginary turns. The family dinner table was always alive with surfing stories, techniques, and upcoming competitions, discussions that excluded Georgia by unspoken agreement, despite her eager questions and attentive gaze. The clinking of silverware against plates created a gentle backdrop to her brother's animated conversations about wave heights and perfect rides, discussions that Georgia absorbed like a sponge. The aroma of seafood stew or grilled fish would fill the room, connecting them all to the ocean that was the center of their lives. One evening, as twilight draped the coast in soft purple hues and the house settled into quiet slumber, Georgia slipped out to the porch where her eldest brother's old, slightly damaged surfboard leaned forgotten in the corner. The smooth surface felt cool against her fingertips, sending a tingle of excitement up her arms, awakening something deep within her soul. The board was lighter than she expected, and as she lifted it, the weight felt perfectly balanced in her young but determined arms. Under the gentle glow of moonlight that silvered the sand and turned the waves into ribbons of light, Georgia made her first secret journey to the shore, her heart pounding with both fear and exhilaration. The sand felt cool and yielding beneath her bare feet, and the whisper of waves seemed to grow louder, welcoming her to their world. The distant cry of a night bird seemed to encourage her as she waded into the shallows, feeling the embrace of the water against her skin. The night ocean welcomed Georgia with gentle waves, perfect for a beginner seeking her first ride, the water surprisingly warm against her skin as she laid on the borrowed board. With careful movements mimicking what she had observed for years, she paddled out, feeling the resistance of water against her palms, the sensation both challenging and deeply satisfying. The rhythmic motion of paddling synchronized with her breathing, creating a meditative state that calmed her initial nervousness. After several attempts and falls that left her sputtering but laughing, Georgia managed to stand briefly on the board, experiencing for the first time the exhilarating sensation of riding a wave. The world seemed to slow down as she glided across the water's surface, the moonlight illuminating her path, the cool spray against her face more refreshing than any morning shower. Time suspended as she balanced precariously on the board, every muscle in her body engaged in maintaining the delicate equilibrium between falling and flying. Night after night, Georgia returned to the shore when the house fell silent, her skills improving with each secret session, her body growing stronger, more attuned to the ocean's moods. The stars became her audience, the moon her spotlight, as she danced across waves with increasing confidence, her movements becoming more fluid with each passing night. The subtle changes in the water's texture beneath her board became a language she understood instinctively, allowing her to anticipate the behavior of each wave. The solitude of these midnight surfing sessions offered Georgia not just skill development, but also moments of profound peace, where the boundaries between herself and the ocean seemed to dissolve. The gentle rocking of waves beneath her board when she rested between rides would lull her into a state of deep tranquility, the rhythm matching her heartbeat. During these quiet moments floating on her back, the vast sky above filled with stars that seemed close enough to touch, she felt gratitude washing over her like the tide. Mornings found Georgia exhausted but glowing with a secret joy, her muscles pleasantly sore, her dreams filled with the sensation of riding waves under starlight. At breakfast, she would hide her smile behind cups of steaming tea as her brothers discussed wave conditions, knowing that she too had experienced the ocean's magic, perhaps even more deeply in the sacred quietude of night. The taste of honey in her tea seemed sweeter these days, as if flavored by her growing confidence and the joy of her secret accomplishment. As months passed, Georgia developed her own unique surfing style, graceful, intuitive, and deeply connected to the rhythm of the ocean. Her technique untaught and therefore uninhibited by conventional rules. Her body learned to read the water, to feel the potential of each wave before it fully formed, developing an almost preternatural sense of timing and balance. The calluses on her hands matched those of her brothers now, though none had noticed the change, too caught up in their own seaside adventures. Summer arrived with longer days and shorter nights, limiting Georgia's secret surfing time, but bringing with it the annual Bayside Surf Competition, an event that transformed their sleepy town into a bustling hub of activity. Colorful flags and banners adorned the streets, and the excited chatter of visitors created a constant hum of anticipation throughout the town. The scent of sunscreen mixed with that of street food created a distinctive summer fragrance that permeated every corner of Bayside. The Hamilton brothers were local favorites to win, their practice sessions drawing crowds of admirers who spread blankets on the sand to watch their impressive techniques. Georgia would sit among these spectators, studying not just her brothers but all competitors, mentally noting their strengths and weaknesses, imagining how she would approach each wave differently. The warmth of the sun on her shoulders and the cool sand between her toes created a pleasant contrast as she absorbed every detail of the surfers' performances. During dinner one evening, Robert announced proudly that this year's competition would, for the first time, include a women's division, his eyes bright with enthusiasm as he described the talented female surfers who had registered. The news sent a jolt of electricity through Georgia's veins, her fork pausing midway to her mouth as possibilities suddenly bloomed like sea anemones in her mind. The savory aroma of her father's famous fish seemed to intensify as her senses heightened with sudden hope and anticipation. "Too bad you don't surf, Georgie," Charlie teased, reaching across to ruffle her hair, "or you could represent the Hamilton family in the women's division." His words, though spoken in jest, ignited a flame of determination in Georgia's heart that burned brighter than any she had felt before. The clink of his spoon against the bowl seemed to punctuate his dismissal, creating a rhythm that matched her quickening heartbeat. Later that night, while the house slept deeply after an exhausting day of preparation for the competition, Georgia made her way to the shore with renewed purpose, her movements guided by moonlight and determination. The night air carried the scent of salt and promise as she paddled out farther than ever before, challenging herself with larger waves, pushing the boundaries of her self-taught skills. The water felt different tonight, charged with possibility, and Georgia responded with bold, confident movements that surprised even herself. As dawn approached, painting the horizon with delicate strokes of pink and gold, Georgia made a decision that sent both terror and exhilaration coursing through her veins. She would enter the competition. The morning light revealed a changed Georgia as she walked home, shoulders squared and gaze steady, her mind already formulating a plan to register without her family's knowledge. The morning dew on beach grass sparkled like tiny diamonds, seeming to celebrate her decision with their quiet brilliance. The day before the competition arrived with perfect surfing conditions, clear skies, moderate winds, and waves that curved like liquid sculptures against the horizon. Georgia submitted her registration form during a moment when her brothers were busy with interviews, her hands trembling slightly as she handed over the paper that would change everything. The registration table's wooden surface felt rough beneath her fingertips, grounding her in the reality of what she was about to do. That evening, unable to sleep despite exhaustion, Georgia sat on the porch swing, listening to the distant sound of waves and feeling a curious blend of fear and serenity wash over her. The gentle creaking of the swing created a soothing rhythm that helped order her thoughts, and the soft cushion cradled her tired body comfortably. A shooting star streaked across the velvet sky, and Georgia closed her eyes, not to make a wish but to express gratitude for the courage she had found within herself. Competition day dawned bright and clear, the beach transformed by colorful tents, judging stands, and crowds of excited spectators who created a vibrant tapestry of movement and sound. Georgia's brothers left early, focused entirely on their preparations, not noticing their sister's unusual quietness or the worn backpack she carried containing her swimsuit and registration confirmation. The sand was already warm beneath her feet as she made her way to the competitors' area, the sound of her heartbeat almost drowning out the announcer's voice booming from speakers. In the women's preparation area, Georgia changed into her simple black swimsuit, so different from the professional gear worn by other competitors, but comfortable and familiar against her skin. A kind volunteer helped her attach the competition number to her suit, the adhesive cool against her back, making the situation suddenly undeniably real. The scent of surf wax permeated the air, mixing with the saltiness of sea spray and creating a fragrance that calmed her nerves slightly. When the announcer called the women's division participants for their preliminary briefing, Georgia stepped onto the sand with other female surfers, feeling simultaneously out of place and exactly where she belonged. The warm sand shifted beneath her feet, adapting to her weight and somehow encouraging her forward. Some competitors gave her curious glances, perhaps wondering about this unknown entrant, but their faces showed no unkindness, only the focused concentration of athletes preparing for their moment. From the corner of her eye, Georgia spotted her family in the spectator area, her father with his camera ready, her brothers alternating between watching the current surfers and preparing their own equipment. They hadn't noticed her yet among the group of female competitors, their attention divided between the ongoing men's competition and their own upcoming heats. The distance between them, measured in feet, but feeling like oceans, Georgia took deep breaths of the salt-tinged air, centering herself in this moment of truth. As the women's division began and competitors were called one by one, Georgia watched and waited, analyzing techniques and approaches, noting how waves were breaking and which lines seemed most successful. The commentator's voice created a soundtrack to the visual display of skill before her, and Georgia allowed the descriptions to enhance her understanding of what judges might be looking for. The sun warmed her shoulders as she stretched occasionally, keeping her muscles loose and ready for her turn. When the announcer finally called Georgia Hamilton, with a note of surprise in his voice, a murmur rippled through the crowd, followed by confused exclamations from the area where her family sat. The sand seemed to shift beneath her feet as she walked toward the water's edge, surfboard under her arm, her focus narrowing to exclude everything but the approaching waves. The cool water welcomed her like an old friend as she waded in, the familiar sensation calming her racing heart. The first wave Georgia caught during her heat transformed her from a nervous participant to a confident competitor, her body remembering all the nights of practice, all the falls and successes that had led to this moment. Time seemed to slow as she maneuvered across the wave's face with intuitive grace, feeling the subtle shifts in the water's energy and responding with movements that felt as natural as breathing. The spray of water against her face tasted of accomplishment and joy, each droplet a tiny celebration on her skin. As Georgia completed her heat and returned to shore, the beach had fallen into an unusual quiet, punctuated only by scattered applause that grew in intensity as she approached the sand. The expressions on the judges' faces, a mixture of surprise and appreciation, told Georgia she had done well, perhaps even exceptionally so, though she tried not to let hope rise too quickly. The warm sand embraced her tired feet as she walked back to the competitors' area, her body pleasantly exhausted but her mind crystal clear. Her brothers found her moments later, their expressions cycling through disbelief, confusion, and finally, a dawning respect that brought unexpected tears to George's eyes. "Where did you learn to surf like that?" Max asked, his voice hushed with wonder, his hand reaching out to squeeze her shoulder gently. The simple touch conveyed more than words could express, an acknowledgement, an apology, a welcome into a world they had unknowingly kept from her. "You've been surfing at night, haven't you?" Charlie said softly, recognition lighting his eyes as pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Her exhaustion some mornings, the slightly repositioned boards, the confidence with which she had discussed surfing techniques despite supposedly never having tried the sport. The gentle breeze carried his words away, but the understanding in his eyes remained, creating a new bridge between them. As finalists were announced and Georgia's name was called among them, Robert appeared beside his children, his weathered face alight with pride and something like wonder as he pulled his daughter into a tight embrace. "Your mother would be so proud," he whispered against her hair, his voice thick with emotion, the scent of his familiar aftershave enveloping Georgia in a cocoon of love and acceptance. The steady beat of his heart against her cheek reminded her of waves on calm nights, consistent, and reassuring. For the final heat, Georgia's brothers helped her prepare, offering tips and encouragement, their expertise now freely shared as they applied proper wax to her borrowed board and discussed wave selection strategies. Their hands, so similar to her own with calluses in identical places, moved with practiced efficiency as they prepared her equipment, their voices overlapping with advice and support. The familiar scent of surf wax brought a sense of unity, a shared language they all now spoke together. As Georgia paddled out for the final round, she felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her, not just for the opportunity to compete, but for the journey that had brought her here, for nights spent in communion with the ocean, for the courage to pursue her passion despite obstacles. The water beneath her board felt particularly buoyant today, as if the ocean itself was supporting her efforts, the gentle rocking motion soothing any remaining nervousness. The waves for the final round seemed especially perfect, rising with clean faces that offered multiple possibilities for maneuvers and expression. Georgia approached each one with a combination of technical skill and artistic interpretation that reflected her unique learning journey. The sunlight caught water droplets as she cut across wave faces, transforming ordinary spray into dazzling diamonds that momentarily surrounded her like a shimmering aura. From the shore, her family watched with newfound appreciation as Georgia demonstrated abilities they had never imagined she possessed, her body moving in harmony with the water, her techniques unconventional but undeniably effective. The crowd's cheers created a distant soundtrack to her performance, but Georgia remained focused on the conversation between herself and the ocean, responding to each wave's unique energy with intuitive precision. The taste of salt on her lips reminded her of countless practice sessions, each one a building block to this moment. As her final wave carried her toward shore, Georgia executed a series of maneuvers that showcased both technical skill and a deep connection with the ocean's rhythm, ending with a flourish that brought spectators to their feet. The sand welcomed her return with soft embrace as she stepped off her board, breathing deeply of the salt-tinged air, feeling simultaneously exhausted and energized by the experience. Droplets of water traced cool paths down her skin as she walked back to the judging area, her heart full and at peace regardless of the outcome. When results were announced and Georgia's name was called as the winner of the women's division, the beach erupted in cheers, loudest among them her brothers who rushed forward to lift her onto their shoulders in celebration. The warmth of the sun seemed to intensify in that moment, bathing everyone in golden light that matched the joy radiating from within Georgia. The trophy in her hands caught sunlight and scattered it in all directions, much like the spray of a perfect wave. That evening, as sunset painted the sky in breathtaking hues of orange and pink, the Hamilton family gathered on their porch. Georgia's trophy placed alongside those of her brothers, belonging there as surely as she belonged among them as a surfer. The gentle evening breeze carried conversations filled with shared experiences, techniques and plans for future surfing adventures that now included all of them. The wooden boards leaning against the rail seemed to glow in the fading light, no longer symbols of exclusion, but of connection. As night fell and stars appeared like distant lighthouses in the vast ocean of sky, Georgia felt a profound sense of contentment settle over her, as peaceful as the ocean on a calm night. The rhythmic sound of waves reaching shore created a perfect lullaby, inviting drowsiness after a day of intense emotion and physical exertion. The weathered porch swing creaked gently as she swayed, matching the rhythm of the distant tide. In the days that followed, Georgia no longer needed to sneak away at night to practice, instead joining her brothers in morning sessions where they shared techniques and celebrated each other's successes. The sunrise sessions brought a different kind of magic than her night surfing had. The rising sun painting the waves with golden light, the shared laughter creating harmonies with the sound of breaking waves. The morning air carried promises of new beginnings with each breath she took. Eventually, Georgia's unique approach to surfing, developed in solitude and refined through pure instinct, began influencing her brother's techniques as well, creating a beautiful exchange of knowledge that enriched all their experiences on the water. The family's surfing style evolved into something recognized throughout the region, a blend of traditional technique and innovative approaches that honored both the sport's history and its future. Their shared passion created deeper bonds between them than they had ever known before. As Georgia floated on her board one golden afternoon, watching her family catch waves nearby, she found herself overwhelmed with gratitude for the journey that had brought her here, the challenges overcome, the secret midnight lessons, the courage to step into the competition that changed everything. The gentle rocking of her board on the water created a soothing rhythm that matched her heartbeat, and the warmth of the sun embraced her like a blessing. As she closed her eyes briefly, letting the sensations wash over her, Georgia knew she had found not just skill, but belonging in these waters, a truth as deep and enduring as the ocean itself.